Welcome to the Salish Sea Fellowship, October 6th, Sunday afternoon service. Our speaker is Joseph Bednarik. His topic is Sex in the Dictionary. Joseph uses sexually explicit language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised. Thanks for listening.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Salish Sea Fellowship. We are a religious community with open hearts and open minds. We embrace the traditional principles of Unitarianism and Universalism. Welcome. My name is Elaine Nelson and I'm the worship associate today, and our speaker is Joseph Bednarik. Okay. And now I invite us to settle in and quiet our minds. We will begin our sacred time together by ringing the chime. We will now light the chalice with these words: in times of light and times of darkness, may this small flame kindle the good in us and in the world.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is so great to see you on this beautiful sunny day. The reading this afternoon is from Dan Gerber, a great poet, and who has the distinction of being a former race car driver and an ordained Zen priest. And he talks about the great thing about having both of those as part of his personality. This is a poem called "Often I Imagine the Earth." Often I imagine the earth through the eyes of the atoms we're made of. Atoms, peculiar atoms everywhere. No me, no you, no opinions, no beginning, no middle, no end. Soaring together like those ancient Chinese birds, hatched miraculously with only one wing, helping each other fly home. First of all, can everybody hear me okay? Is there anybody? Turn the microphone more this way. If at any time you can't hear me or I start to fade, just give me a wave. Or if you have a pea shooter, just aim toward me. And before we begin this morning, I do want to do the good hygiene, good practice of a content warning. I do want to inform everyone that the sermon this afternoon is entitled Sex in the Dictionary, and it deals with the topics of human sex and sexuality, sex education, and most importantly, the anxiety about the power of knowledge as delivered in books. Now, as such, within less than a minute and throughout our time together, I will be verbalizing from the pulpit specific words and phrases that define sex acts between consenting adults, as well as sexual anatomy, human sexuality, and quality sexuality education. If such language is offensive to you, if you are not comfortable with the topic of sex for whatever reason, you are encouraged to take care of yourself in whatever way feels best, including leaving the room for some fresh air if that's what you need to do. Sex is a topic that can lead to emotional responses, sometimes very powerful emotional responses. And most important, just to remember, we're all here together participating in this service, and we are co-creating, we're doing it, a safe and dynamic place called sanctuary. And part of that dynamic co-creation is offering abundant space and abundant time to stay and listen, to leave and to breathe, to know that you will be welcomed back whenever you choose to return. So I told a friend, no one's leaving. That's awesome. A friend of mine told me, sex sells. They're going to stay. So I told a friend a few months ago that I was, in fact, writing a sermon called Sex in the Dictionary, and his face sort of clouded up a little bit, and he asked, very curious, is there a spiritual element to that talk? And I told him that I considered human sexuality a very spiritual topic, as any tantric yogi might tell you. Sex is also a very religious topic, mostly it seems with conservative religious leaders and practitioners trying to regulate and control the power of sex. Now, religiously, we Unitarian Universalists, we bring sexuality to the forefront of our ministries when we promote and proclaim that we are a welcoming religion. We fly rainbow flags. UUs were on the cutting edge of performing same-sex marriages when that was a new thing. And many of our congregations proudly offer our whole lives sexuality education classes. And my guess is that many of you have read or heard the story about a school district in Florida that pulled over 1,600 books from their shelves for content review, which was a preemptive move in response to a bill passed by the Florida legislature. Now, according to Politico, quote, the bill aims to expand Florida law to require that books facing objections for being pornographic, harmful to minors, or describe or depict sexual activity must be pulled within 5 days and remain out of circulation for the duration of the challenge, close quote. Now, given that the phrase describe or depict sexual activity is a vast opening for anybody wishing to challenge a book, among the 1,600 books pulled for review were dictionaries. Now, on first blush, pulling a dictionary for a content review sounds absurd. Not so fast. I happen to own a copy of a dictionary, a very common dictionary, Merriam-Webster's 10th edition, so I did my own research. And so in honor of my dictionary's age, my dictionary is published in 2000, I am going to highlight for you 24 words found in my dictionary that could prove troublesome by authorities in Florida. There's always giggling in this sermon. Sex, sexuality, homosexual, heterosexual, pansexual, asexual, penis, vagina, intersex, transgender, lesbian, queer, bisexual, labia, ovaries, anus, testicles, intercourse, foreplay, fellatio, and its blunter cousin, blowjob, masturbation, cunnilingus. Now, if you were counting, that was 23. I saved the best word for last. Just wait for it. Wait for it. Orgasm. Now, as we just heard, the dictionary can be a very racy book. Although, truth be told, the type is really, really small. It's hard to read. And an exciting and very provocative word like anus is alphabetized between anuria and anvil. So you either can't pee or you're hammering on hot metal, or both, I guess. And because English contains at least 1 million words, and my humble dictionary contains only 100,000 or so, and because we humans have been thinking about, dreaming about, fantasizing about, and having sex since the dawn of humans, we could go on and on and on with other beautiful human sexuality words, such as joy, intimacy, fun, hug, care, touch. So to provide a counterweight to the dictionary being reviewed in Florida, I would like to introduce you to the Our Whole Lives program, which goes by the shorthand of OWL, O-W-L. Now, OWL is this age-appropriate, information-rich sexuality education curriculum that was developed in part by UUs to teach about sex and sexuality in their congregations. As a controversial evangelical Christian writer suggested in his memoir entitled Sex, Mom, and God, most, if not all, of organized religion's shortcomings stem from hang-ups about sex. Now, we UUs, we're taking action early on to try to minimize those hang-ups. Now, this is a classic Taoist approach of dealing with a problem before it becomes a problem. Now, over the years, at Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Port Townsend, we've offered OWL classes in the following age groups. The little kids, basically K through 2, where children learn about babies and bodies. The middle kids, basically grades 4 to 6, where students learn about puberty and their changing bodies. And there's much discussion to assure them that the changes that they are experiencing are perfectly normal. That was a word combination that we said many, many, many times. What you're going through is perfectly normal, which is very soothing when there are such radical changes happening within your body. And then there's the older kids, basically high school age, where we talk about relationships, physiology, sexuality, and perhaps the most important life skill of all, which I am delighted that we as a religious body continue to do, to ask questions and pursue sound answers. Now, over the years, I have been an OWL facilitator in all those different grade levels. And it was one of the most important things that I ever did as part of a UU congregation. There was an OWL class going on this past spring in the 7th through 9th graders, and I actually served as a substitute teacher a few times, and I had the great good fortune of serving during a workshop or a session that was called Lovemaking. And just listen to the stated goal of this particular lesson. Quote, to reinforce the message that healthy sexual relationships are consensual, non-exploitative, mutually pleasurable, safe, developmentally appropriate, and based on respect, mutual expectations, and caring. Sign me up. Wow, what a class. Now, to get certified as an OWL facilitator, I actually had to invest a few weeks getting trained. And these were rich educational opportunities filled with classes and workshops, group discussions. There were games, personal reflections, writing, and worship. And now the overall goal of the training was to get everybody comfortable with the material, to be able to talk frankly about sex and sexuality. And it was amazing what we confronted during those training sessions, where we felt our own discomfort, where we felt our own hang-ups. And there was this one man who could not say the M word. I believe he was a middle school teacher. He could not say the M word. The trainers work with him, and when he finally did publicly utter the M word, there was this great rejoicing, followed by the best masturbation joke ever. Studies show that only 2% of men masturbate, and 98% are liars. Now, laughter like that was one of the soundtracks of our training, right? And as the weekend progressed, we felt more and more like we were poised and prepared to do very important work. And this really came into high relief when the trainer asked us to reflect on our own sex ed experiences. How did we learn about sex and sexuality? From whom did we learn? Our parents, other siblings, the media, the streets? And then she asked a question that I am going to ask you. So let's do this exercise together. Raise your hand if you had a good to great sex education experience when you were young. Good to great. Let me see, I don't know if I can count that high. 1, 2, 3. There are 3 people in this room who self-describe as having a good to great sex ed experience. Now, in both my training sessions, it was also a pitiful number of people who couldn't raise their hand, didn't raise their hand. And then we went on to share some of the illustrative stories of how we learned, and I will briefly share mine. Now, my official sex ed began in 6th grade when we watched 2 film strips. I don't know if you remember those film strips back in the Stone Age, about sperm and eggs and breeding. One film strip, remember this is sex ed. One film strip focused on salmon. The other on gulls, seagulls to be precise. Now the good thing about this scenario is that it provided a lot of room for creative thinking. The bad news about this scenario is I was deeply concerned about swimming to exhaustion, ejaculating, and then being eaten by a grizzly. And so when I started to think about it, the sex ed I received in public school, in health classes, junior high, senior high, and this is a time when a very mysterious disease is starting to burble up in the news, sexually transmitted disease. It was rooted in fear, in danger, and it was centered around pregnancy, disease, and probable death. It was as if my body would explode if I touched another human being. I learned the words syphilis, gonorrhea, herpes, painful urination, festering pustule, chancre, abstinence. And I never heard these words: love, romance, gentle touch, sensational, skin hunger, orgasm, or joy. Now imagine that simple, beautiful word in sex ed class: joy. Imagine your high school health teacher saying, folks, let me assure you, some of the most intimate and joyful experiences of your life will likely be when you have sex with a partner that you love. May you all be so fortunate. Go forth, make love, and for God's sake, use protection. What an amazing, revolutionary statement that is. And it's so true. Now, my parents, who with 3 children apparently had sex at least 3 times. Do you remember when it dawned on you that your parents had sex? Wait a minute, I exist. Wait a minute. Oh my God. My parents gave me the word joy, but they did not know it. Now, when I was a young teen, I happened to find their copy of Joy of Sex. Major revelation. One day, when you're innocently rummaging through your parents' dresser, the tall dresser, the top drawer of the tall dresser, just happened to lift some t-shirts, just happened to find that book. And whenever my parents are away, I just happen to borrow the book, lock myself into the bathroom just in case, and allow my known world to explode a zillion times. The book, as you likely know, chock full of good information, illustrated with drawings and several colored images from erotic art from different countries and cultures. And some of my revelations included: women have hair in their armpits. Some people like to be tied up. 69 isn't just a number. It was amazing. was mysterious, and was all right there in the book, in my father's dresser. And it was a stunning counterpoint to when my parents presented me the talk, their version of the talk. But unbeknownst to them, they gave me the joy of sex. And unbeknownst, of course, because I've never told them. And since I never wanted to get caught, I memorized the position of the book exactly, would always return it. They would never suspect a thing. And then one day, I went looking for the book, and it moved. It was in a different position in the drawer. And I started to think, wait a minute, my parents are reading this book? Was it my brother maybe who read this book? My sister? At dinner that night, we're just all looking around the table. Who has got this secret knowledge? It was almost too much to take. And then several years later, I remember purchasing my own copy of the book. And this was in the era before Amazon, before the internet. So getting a hold of these things as a teenager was a pretty, wasn't rough, but it took some doing, right? And it was one of the first books that I ever bought. And I used my hard-earned dishwasher money. And I remember that heightened exhilaration when I went to the checkout counter. That is when you realize that books have power. When you're like 16 and you're buying your copy of The Joy of Sex, right? And you use cash, so you can't be traced. And so think about your own experiences with sex ed, how you learned, where you learned from, and consider sharing a bit of that story during coffee hour. And to be very proud that, broadly speaking, Unitarian Universalists, we are social activists with the OWL program. So when our children are asked the same question, did you have a good or great sex ed class or education growing up, they can say, yeah, I did. I took this class at our fellowship, and I learned to put condoms on cucumbers. And now I invite you to imagine yourself on the cusp of becoming a mature sexual being and feeling that need for knowledge, for knowing what was going on in your body and your heart, to get your questions answered straight. And one of the finest tools that we used in OWL is this amazing device, which I wish I had in my daily life, and that's the question box. Now, the question box was a main feature of the ritual that began and ended every OWL class. At the end of every lesson, we handed every person in the class a little card and a pencil. And everyone in the class was encouraged to write a question and drop it into the box. Questions had no names attached to any of them, so no one knew who asked what. And after class, the facilitators met privately to read the questions, and during the week, we did any necessary research, and at the start of the next session, facilitators answered each and every question so that the whole group could hear the answers. Now, often, during these answering sessions, bing, you could hear a pin drop. And I want to share with you a dozen questions that were submitted to the QUUF question box over the years. And please know that I asked for and received the blessings of the Director of Religious Education to share these questions. And just like an owl, I ask you to listen respectfully. What is spooning? Why are there more images of sexy women than men in ads and magazines? Every guy I like, including the one now, ends up liking my best friend. It hurts. What is a dildo? Is there a better way to find out about your sexual orientation besides a physical experience? If you make out with a guy after learning his name 10 minutes before, are you considered a slut? If someone you care about rapes you, is it considered raping? The only animals that have sex for pleasure are dolphins and humans. Is this true? What does bisexual and transgendered mean? Do they go together? Is there really a cherry that pops when a girl first has sexual intercourse? What is your favorite pickup line? If you were our age, What would be the most romantic thing you think someone would do? What a privilege to be among young people with questions like these. These are pages and pages and pages of these questions generated from students in Port Townsend. Incredibly thoughtful, incredibly provocative, incredibly real world. And consider the ones above, arcing from an innocent question about spooning, one of the most intimate sleeping positions our species has ever created, to a devastating question about sexual assault. And then listen to this one again. Is there a better way to find out your sexual orientation besides a physical experience? I cannot recall exactly how we answered that one, but I guarantee this. It came within the context of being a welcoming congregation, a fellowship where we take intentional steps to become more welcoming and inclusive of people of all sexual orientations and all gender identities. Here was a young person in wonderment, with certain stirrings in their heart, in their head, and in their genitals. Here was a person with the courage to ask a question that he or she or they knew would be answered aloud in their peer group. And here was our opportunity to say, brilliant question. I am really glad somebody asked it. And off we go. And what happened in that room at that moment was deep learning about sex and sexuality, about being in community, and about empathy. And that, my friends, is a world worth creating. And what's happening now, this moment, is a reaffirmation of Unitarian Universalism being welcoming. If you're gay, straight, lesbian, bisexual, asexual, transgender, queer, or questioning, welcome. We are very glad that you're here. We have a lot of work and a lot of play to do together. And one thing, in thinking about the question box, imagine right now a question that is kind of working its way around yourself. And imagine that you had a mechanism with which you could get trusted information. Now, as I grow older, and as my energy and body starts to shift and change, and as I listen to and hang out with my older friends, I know the questions never stop. And that's why the curriculum is called Our Whole Lives. And I can imagine being in an adult OWL class. They actually exist. I've never been a part of one. I don't think we've ever taught it around here or had it. But imagine hearing questions like this. Do women really lose interest in sex after menopause? What is the effect on males as testosterone levels diminish? Why did it take a year to make love after the baby was born? Why can't I get an erection? Why can't I get wet like I used to? I think I'm gay, even though I'm married with children and I love my spouse. Why are my dreams so carnal? I think I'm fine without ever having sex again. How do you keep romantic love alive? Thousands and thousands and thousands more questions like this. And to close, I'd like to bring your attention to an old book, an antique book that I actually found in one of my forays into a used bookstore. This book was published in 1897, and I love the title, Sex Worship. And here's a short paragraph from the first chapter entitled The Basis of Religion. Quote, all religions have had a common origin, and that however much they may differ in their teachings and their institutions, they but represent different methods of worshiping one and the same object, Brahma, Jehovah, God, Allah, and hundreds of others. These are all simply different names for the same deity, as viewed from different standpoints, And this deity, this universal object of adoration, is the supreme creative power. That sounds very you to me in an antique book called Sex Worship. The one addition I would like to make to that quote is to add the word love to the phrase supreme creative power, to create this deity, this universal object of adoration is the supreme creative power of love, a capital L, love, which is the finest word in the dictionary, especially regarding sex. Amen.
Let us say our closing words together. You will find the words in your order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the loving joy of being freely together. We carry that joy until we meet again.